this time, I will call the meeting to order for the Board of Public Works for January 27, 2020. At this time, we are at public appearances for non-agenda items, and I only see two individuals in the audience, and I don't see any slips for the public appearance portion, so we'll move on to approval of the minutes from January 6, 2020. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Gronetsky, is there a second?
Second.
A second exists, we are in discussion. Is there any changes or corrections to the minutes from January 6, 2020?
Nope.
Being none, then we will go into a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes from January 6, 2020 may indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed may say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We are on item number 4, which are review items and the review of utility November P card purchases and December checks. And we'll go to our Director of Public Works for a review of that.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything out of the ordinary in those. I actually forgot to bring those down with me, so I apologize for that, but I don't think there was anything out of the ordinary in the bills.
Okay. Is there any member of the board who has any questions on item number 4, the review item, number A? Letter A, I should say.
Chairman, I had one.
Sure, Dave.
It's, I'm not sure, page 4 here. The uniforms, is that, it's Cintas for the utility uniforms. Are these new uniforms? Do the guys
They
have?
launder them,
They order them and they have so many in the agreement to get new ones every year?
and then they get them laundered.
Oh, okay.
It's, the Cintas takes care of them, they send them in and they get them cleaned or whatever.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, sounds good.
And is this gonna be like an ongoing thing? Cause I don't remember seeing these particular like line items on regular.
I think it's been since I've been here and well before that, so I think it's been
They've had it for a
standard.
few years.
Okay.
maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Anybody else with questions? Being none, we will move into item number 5, which is a report from the department and our Director of Public Works.
Okay, the first thing, and one of the things we've been dealing with, I try to keep you up to speed, is the Lake Barney issue. So we had another meeting today. Things are progressing, while there's a lot to work through, so it's taking some time, but the city of Oregon's preparing some improvements downstream so they can handle some additional water. We really can't do a whole lot until some of that happens. Some adjoining landowners are gonna do a preliminary, hopefully, drawdown of Lake Barney before our project takes place. So they're working on that with us and the city of Oregon. We have another meeting scheduled for February 10th. We have our RFP out to tackle the larger problem of the permanent solution, and I think that's due February 10th. I'm sorry, the meeting scheduled is March 2nd. I read the wrong line.
Okay.
So our next meeting is March 2nd at 9 a.m. here at the Jane Sealing Room. But February 10th is our RFP. Will be back for the larger solution for that. Other than that, it's not a lot has changed from the last meeting. We have contacted the DNR and tried to get a contact person set up for the Lacey Seminole stormwater study as well. We've got that RFP, approved, and we're in the process of that. So as soon as we get that contact person, we want to have a preliminary kickoff meeting with the DNR for that. Otherwise, a lot of plans for additional developments coming in. Stoner Prairie, Crescent Crossing. I think Fahey Fields probably will get tabled next week, but the next council meeting, there will be a development coming forward from them. The solar farm, we've reviewed that, and that's going through the process, so that's moving forward. And then Fish Hatchery Road, we do have contracts back. And we're just waiting for a couple signatures here at City Hall, and then that'll be officially awarded and underway. We're working on the Basswood cul-de-sac and obviously the resurfacing projects for next year, amongst a whole bunch of other projects. So.
Okay. Any questions for the director? Dave?
With the solar farm, is there a zoning change that has to be made
It's a
for
conditional use, I believe.
a conditional use permit?
So it still stays agriculturally zoned.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, being none, no comments or questions, we will move on to our agenda items, and it's number 6A. At this time, the chair would entertain a motion to approve Resolution R 178-19, approving Second Amendment to the Agreement for Subdivision Improvements in the Plat of Terra Vesa. Is there a motion?
Motion.
I'll second him.
So moved by Granetsky, second by Wilborn, and we are in discussion. We'll go to the record.
Okay. So part of why we needed this is we found an abnormally large number of cracks in the concrete storm sewer. The huge preponderance of these cracks are very small, and they probably will heal themselves. You know, the concrete will get some moisture and they'll re-cement themselves, but we wanted to have an additional warranty period. The pipe was already in the ground. It'd have been very expensive to take it out. You know, there was improvements on top of some of it, so we've got an additional 5-year warranty. We think they'll come back probably sometime next spring, TV the sewer. Whatever's healed, we'll take off the list, and we're requiring an additional bond to protect us, so if they don't heal and we need to replace those, we'd have money to be able to get those replacements made. The second thing is, we got a price from the contractor to do the signalized intersection, and that price we weren't really happy with. So we decided we're gonna do it next year, and the way it's set up in the development agreement is the developer was to pay for the signalized intersections, and we'd reimburse for 3 legs. 2 legs of it are the county, 1 leg is ours. So now that kind of is clarifying that, it's putting it back in, we're doing it, and then the developer will have to reimburse us for their share of that intersection.
Where's that intersection, Mike?
That's Lacey and MM.
Okay.
And then with that, the way the phasing was set up for acceptance of the improvements, that intersection was tied to it because the developer was doing it. Since we're doing it now, we're gonna take that requirement out of the phasing and we corrected the phasing requirements for the plat.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Is there any discussion?
I just have one question on that, on the cracks that, how did they all of a sudden appear? Or is there a flaw when contractor was putting it in, or is it something that came when they were?
Well, the pipe is generally inspected above ground, so we think it happened after, but it could happen, you know, that was a huge site out there, and they had to move pipe from one section to another. So it could have been in transporting them after they were inspected above ground, or it could have been loading and proper compaction. It could just be something with the pipe, you know, that these are really, really small cracks, so that's, you know, they just might have appeared more when we actually televise and shoot the pipe and see. So we think it was post-delivery problem, and it's the only one, that's the only development we've had this problem on, so, but,
Most that always comes from the same outfit anyway.
it does all come from the same outfit, so it's a little bit suspect that way, that it's probably something to do with installation or transportation within the site.
Okay.
You know, they got moved a lot around in the site, so.
Okay,
Thanks.
okay, yep.
Do you have any experience with concrete self-healing? My experience, that never happened. It just keeps getting worse, but I'm not a.
These are really, if you look in the manual, they're really superficial cracks.
Okay.
Our ordinance, or our requirements are no cracking. You know, there is some acceptable cracking in the ASTM guidelines that a lot of these would probably fall within that acceptable range. But since we have that ordinance, we wanted to give ourselves some additional protection rather than just accepting them, so we're probably being a little cautious, I think. I feel pretty comfortable that most of them, anything that we knew that wasn't what we thought were likely to self-heal or very superficial, we had them fix or repair.
Okay.
Or they are still on the list to be fixed and repaired.
Okay.
Right.
Anybody else? No? If not, then we'll go into a vote. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed may say nay. And in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We're on item 6B, Resolution R11-20. The chair will entertain a motion on a resolution approving a pumping plan for Hillside Heights Pond. And I'll take a motion.
I'll move approval of Resolution R11-20.
So moved by Herbst. Is there a second?
Second.
And before we go into a discussion, I will call on a member of the public who wishes to speak. It is David Fahey, 5376 Irish Lane in Fitchburg, speaking on behalf of himself. David, you can go ahead.
And then now it's on. I'm not opposed to it. I just want to go on record on a few items. The piping, or the pumping plan pumps it down in front of my house through the ditch that goes in front of the farm and my house. And I talked to Mike and I also talked to Mark. I'd like to make sure the city's on record that we should probably clean out that ditch sooner versus later, and That would be one of my requests. And then it also comes to the property line. There's a 14-inch culvert right there. If we can add another 25 feet, we can get to the other side of that culvert so we don't flood it through that, and then I think it'll flow fine. And I think Mike agrees with me on that one. And then on the, there's a correction, there's not a culvert between the two houses. That's more to the west that they have to block. So I think that's just a identification issue on the map. And then there's a comment on figure 2, I think it is, about overlapping the driveway. And if it does overlap the driveway, I'm hoping that the city will put some gravel back that gets washed out. And it's not only the driveway. If it goes over the driveway, it cuts out that shoulder there between the two driveways. So, I mean, I'm not asking for anything out of the ordinary. If they wash the gravel out, hopefully they can just put a little gravel back on, and we'll see from there. And hopefully the timing can be situated so that we're not flooding the fields, because if I plant on May 1st, there's a lot of money in the ground, and if the corn sits under water for an inch or two for a few days, that's money I lose. So there is an impact. It's not just let it flow up down the road and not worry about everyone else. I mean, I don't know how to grow rice, but
You told me there was clay. You need
clay,
a lot of
but
rice.
on the bottom. So those were just a few comments.
Can you show me which culvert, the
Yep.
crossroad culvert isn't there, so I can make the correction for the first thing?
So Mike, if we had to pipe, if we have to pump out of there, is there to get it down to a level, is there a acre feet amount or gallons, or do you have a sense of?
When we pumped last time, we pumped because we had to pump because of the plants that were planted in the first, the new stormwater pond. They were submerged, and that was gonna kill them, so we had to, but then when they pumped into the pond that was just south of the existing pond, well, then it was full. So we pumped out to get a little capacity so that every time it rained, those plants wouldn't be submerged. But to David's comments, one is I wholeheartedly agree we gotta clean the ditch. We tried to before we pumped the last time, we couldn't get diggers out there. Diggers Hotline, Mark had trouble getting Diggers Hotline out there, and he did scratch a few areas, but he was very reluctant to do any digging without Diggers Hotline. So we do know, we do wanna do that and reestablish the ditch. It's kinda silted in a lot of areas, so it does need improvement. We wanna do that, and my goal would be to try to get that accomplished this spring. As far as the pumping goes, this isn't something we wanna have to do. You know, in a normal weather season, we might not have to at all, but if those ponds are imminently gonna threaten somewhere, we'd like to pump when we have a decision, you know, where we have some timing, so we can either make provisions, because if it's flooding, probably everywhere else is flooding, then we're pumping and creating a problem where they might already have a problem. If we can be a little proactive and do it maybe during some dry events, dry weather times, it won't have the same impact downstream. And typically, once it gets past Mr. Fahey's property, it does dissipate quite a bit. It's not like a huge volume, so, and we will be doing the pumping ourselves, so we'll have control of that. It's one of the capital improvements projects that was approved is to buy the stormwater pump. So once we do that, then we'll have kind of control of that. So the idea is to try to do it with the least amount of impact as possible while protecting as much property as possible.
So just two questions. So
Yep.
in a normal, because we got a lot of severe weather events, extreme weather events, in a normal circumstance, you'd say that this would not be necessary, this pumping plan? And then my second question is, this project's in the CIP, is that right?
The pumping plan is not, this is just an operations plan, so we're just laying out how we're gonna go about it. The pump is a CIP, to buy
Pump
the
is a
pump.
CIP.
The
Pump
reason
is
we
a CIP.
pumped last time is because they had to pump from one pond to the other, so they had it on site, so the mob cost was already done, and we had money in the project, so then we could pump those down, so we had a little bit of capacity. And part of the other reason we did it is they were full, and we didn't want to go into the winter with the idea that we could end up with a rain, snow event. That creates a lot of runoff, so we wanted to have a little bit of storage in those ponds.
Okay.
You know.
All right. So other quick questions. Just generally speaking, I get what we're doing, where it's going. Do we have any sort of threshold as to when this would happen? Is it, is there a pole that's going to sit in the middle of the pond, and once it crosses the blue line, we start pumping? How does that look?
There really isn't. I think it's more of a common sense thing, is as we see weather events coming, if, the threat is imminent. What we did when we pumped this time is two reasons really generated. We had a pump there, and the pond to the south was already full, and we didn't want to use the capacity of the other pond because those plants need to establish before they could be submerged. So it's really going to be, if both ponds are getting to capacity and we feel like we still are going to have rain. So like if we were in the rainy season and those ponds are full, we'd probably try to pump in between rain events.
Okay, so this is going to take staff monitoring, resident monitoring, kind of calling up saying, hey, this is something, whenever you can get on the radar and do that.
Yes,
Sort of.
typically we drive by that during the summer all the time, and the neighbors around the ponds let us know when they think that they're getting close to that threshold as well.
Okay. Second question, two parts. One is, obviously, the pump would be in the city's, arsenal of items. Are there other things that we think we can use the pump for? And then the second part of that is, if we're doing a Hillside Heights pumping plan, do we need pumping plans other places?
We likely will. As part of that Stoner Prairie, Lacey Road Seminole stormwater study, there'll likely be an emergency pumping plan that comes along with that. We need to pump sometimes if we have to dredge or take sediment out of some ponds. So yes, there'll be multiple uses for the pump.
Okay.
And there probably are other ponds that we'll create pumping plans for. Those two, though, are probably the most noticeable, the ones that are in kettles that have the most propensity to flood.
Is Mark able to, we have the machinery to do that wheeled vehicle with the back one, or with the whole?
Correct.
We don't have to rent anything to?
We'll do that ourselves with equipment that's in our arsenal.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, if there's no one else, then we'll go into a vote. All in favor, may indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed may say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We're on to item number 6C, Resolution R13-20, a resolution authorizing a cost-sharing agreement with the city of Madison for the reconstruction of North Fish Hatchery Road.
So this is obviously part of the Fish Hatchery Road project. Part of the Greenway Cross intersection lies within the city of Madison, about 25% of it. So this would be for us to recoup those expenses, and it's about $572,000. So this is an agreement so that we can bill the city of Madison for their share of the cost of the Fish Hatchery Road project.
Can't get a more favorable survey that shows 50%?
So which part of Greenway Cross lies in the city of Madison?
Gosh, without a map, I would have to,
Is it over by the bank?
I believe it would be on that side.
Okay,
Yeah.
because that was also the planned roundabout.
There is a planned roundabout
And
over in that area.
Are they then covering cost for work for that?
I don't have the answer to that.
Okay.
I'm not sure that that's not back in all of our jurisdiction, the roundabout itself.
Okay.
I think it's just the intersection on Fish Hatchery that's in their jurisdiction.
Okay.
Yeah, you go either direction, it goes back to us.
I believe so.
Yes, it does. On the map I had back.
Yeah, I do think it's a jagged boundary.
Okay, all right.
Okay. $572,000, correct?
Correct.
We'll take it. We'll take what we can get. I met with the chief of staff from the county, Joe Parisi's chief of staff, and I gotta tell you, I do want to thank them, and Jenny Dye as well, because they were great on this, trying to get as much as they could for the city of Fitchburg. I think they sort of did go beyond their typical cost-sharing agreement, so we're happy. We'll take what we can get. as happy as, you know, I mean, as happy as one could be. You still gotta pay some,
Still hurts my billfold, but
Yeah, I mean-
I'm happier. I'm happier.
you're happier, yeah, like, you're not in despair. Okay, so, anybody else?
We haven't made a motion on this yet.
We have not?
No, we have not.
Really? Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion.
I was,
I'm
so
sorry.
we approve resolution R-13-20.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, that's a mistake by the chair, always do the motion before the discussion. Anybody else? No? It's usually a hot topic. Nothing?
Well, just as long as it don't go over what we're sitting at already for a total cost would be nice.
Okay, well, hey, we're gonna work on it.
And anything that's under their, this is an estimate, so anything that's in their jurisdiction, if there's an overrun in their jurisdiction, they'd be responsible for that.
Okay,
So was the, did you have a price for that intersection and then 20,
We-
you know,
we-
and the breakdown? How did you come up with?
We had unit prices for what was in that area that is their jurisdiction, and that's how we came up with it, based on the bid.
All right, that sounds fair.
anybody else? Okay, we'll go to a vote. All in favor may indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed may say nay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We're on to item number 6D, Resolution R 2020, a resolution to approve requirements for new city mandated stormwater facilities. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion will entertain any motion.
I'll move approval of resolution R 20-20.
There is a motion from Dave Wilborn. Is there a second?
No,
Second.
Dave Herbst.
Herbst.
Dave Herbst, sorry about that. Okay, and the second is from Mr. Granetsky. And we'll go into discussion. We'll go to the Director of Public Works.
Okay, so does two things, is for our stormwater facilities that we have to maintain for new developments, we wanted some consistency as far as getting access and what we're calling, reasonable access to the pond, so we can maintain them and not have to, drive all the way around the world to get to these things. And then also to have more effective and more ease of maintenance, so it really is just kind of clarifying what our expectations are, a few things that we don't necessarily like and why we don't like them. We're not completely excluding them, but a few things, practices would require, special permission. Underground storage, if we can avoid it, we want to avoid it. It's just very difficult and expensive to maintain, as well as for the developer to install. The same thing like with rain gardens. I know that there's some in front of residential. We're trying to discourage that because typically single-family residential want to maintain their property out front. So we're trying to minimize some of those impacts. It's kind of a learning curve from some of the things that have happened in the past. So if there's some specifics that you want me to go into, I would be happy to do so. But otherwise, it's just kind of really setting a good set of standards to help improve our process.
So this is new requirements starting with new developments.
Correct. Yep.
Are there recommendations then, again, just kind of thinking through terrace rain gardens, for example, for those developments that may have already put them in, are those permitted to be removed?
What we've looked at, Mike, is we've looked at maybe some different planting materials.
Okay.
That would be more palatable to the residents, and maybe even still having the infiltration area, but maybe having it be turf grass is an option. But our first idea still is to maybe have some prairie or some rain garden type plantings that were more palatable. I know the stuff up there can look very weedy because they're tall and maybe
Yeah.
not appropriate.
And the thing that I would, and maybe you can help me and everybody maybe watching. So when those, if that is something, is that something we would work with the developers on as they're putting these things in? Is that something where, again, there's, if people wanted to maintain the ones that were already existing, could they feel free to scrape those out and put their own plants in? What does that look like?
They really shouldn't be doing that because they are part of a stormwater management plan, so they are part of the requirements of the development. But we could entertain looking at different plantings that could go in there if there was something more palatable to the resident.
And when you say we, I want to also make sure that the city wouldn't be on the hook for that, so.
Correct. It would be, we would look at it, but they would be doing the
Okay.
revisions.
And then would there be an approval process, or what would that look like?
for the existing, we haven't talked about that, and that's not part of this at all. So
Yeah.
I think that would be a process that we would probably want to work through.
Okay. Because at any time we do the, kind of the bigger things like the stormwater runoff, we have a great plan in place for newer development, but then you get caught kind of looking around when you see these areas that haven't had that, and they're like, well, we need resources to fix it. And it's like, well, it was acceptable way back when, and now it's not. So I want to avoid those at all costs.
Sure,
Especially
absolutely.
as we have new development in the city of Fitchburg.
And that's kind of what some of this is geared towards, is to avoid those, from this point forward.
Okay. Anybody else? No more discussion? Any questions? No questions? We're going to a vote. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed may say nay. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We're on to item 6D, Resolution R16-20, a resolution authorizing the 2020-2024 MAM swap intergovernmental agreement. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
A motion by Gronetsky, second by
Herbst.
Herbst. You're motioning to
Approve.
Approve.
approve. Okay. There's a motion to approve, and this is an intergovernmental agreement. We'll hear from the director.
Yep, so this is an agreement with MAM Swap. So we have an MS4 permit. It's basically a stormwater discharge permit with the DNR. And as part of that, we have to provide education and outreach to the community, as far as stormwater goes. What MAM Swap does is, if you look through the document, there's numerous communities that kind of cooperatively combined, so that MAM Swap provides this education and outreach for all the communities in this vicinity. And it's just much more economical for them to do that. They've done it since, I think, like 2013 for sure, if not before then. So this is just, it was a 5-year agreement before. It's just coming before us again to be renewed. And that's kind of the basics of it, unless you get a specific question.
Have we had this budgeted in our,
It is budgeted.
and what, give me an example of the outreach or education.
Well, one thing, and this is something that isn't even, I don't think, part of this, but I know that they've done, where they've done a painting on an inlet, and it says it drains to the river, and they do this, outreach with a school. Some of it might be just, they create pamphlets to explain to people, where that storm sewer goes, what the implications are if you dump, contaminants in there,
Okay.
to the people. So it's those kind of things.
This is a joint stormwater discharge permit between the entities of Fitchburg, Madison, Middleton, Monona, Stoughton, Sun Prairie, Verona, Village of Cottage Grove, Cross Plains, DeForest, Maple Bluff, McFarland, Shorewood Hills, Wanakee, Windsor, Town of Blooming Grove, Burke, Madison, Middleton, and Westport, Dane County, and the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Is that right?
That's correct.
So
I'm getting,
Pittsburgh's paying approximately 10% of this, of the cost of this program is what it looks like to me.
Yep.
9% maybe.
It's based on population.
Yeah.
It's just more cost effective to have one group producing the same materials for the whole group rather than us
Yeah.
trying to do it individually. And there's more consistency across the area too, so that's an advantage.
So is the educational part or outreach, was it part of state law with?
It's part of our permit.
Part of our permit?
It's part of our
okay.
permit requirements.
Okay,
And that is for everybody that has an MS4 permit, has this education and outreach. It's not specific to us. It's anybody with an MS4 permit
okay.
has that component.
anybody else? Questions or comments? Being none, we're going to a vote. All in favor, may indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed may say nay. That passes. Item 6F, Resolution R21-20, a resolution to approve an intergovernmental agreement with the town of Verona to complete a study of Goose Lake. Is there a motion?
I so move we approve resolution R-21-20.
Second that motion.
Motion by Wilborn, second by Herbst. We are in discussion.
So this is, Goose Lake kind of backs onto Fitchburg. It's part of the flooding issue that we have at Fitchburg. So this is to it's the intergovernmental agreement before we go out for an RFP, so that we're gonna share in the costs 50-50 with the town of Verona for this study. So that's what this is really about, but then the next thing will be the actual study to try to see if we can do something with the Goose Lake outlet structure to help minimize the flooding on Fitchburg. And it should be noted, I guess it isn't for your board, but too, when this goes to council, it does require a 2/3 vote. Originally, we thought we might better get a $10,000 grant. That didn't happen, so then an additional $5,000 is getting paid by the city of Fitchburg, and an additional $5,000 by the town of Verona.
So where's Goose Lake located?
So it would be due west of Fitchburg Road, and, 151, kind of, it's that lake right there along the edge of the road, across from County Materials, on the
Okay.
opposite side, on the south side of,
So
the highway.
Is Goose Lake in, okay. right by
it's in the
highway.
town,
It is in the town.
yeah.
Because now I just get, in the study is necessary, why?
Because it backs water onto Fitchburg Road and floods our road,
Okay.
is why we want to have it done.
It's filled in over the years. If you look, at the end closer to Fitchburg Road, there's big trees now that are
Yeah.
flooded, that weren't. And so a couple things have happened. I think there's been a change maybe in flow of direction, but that pond or Goose Lake has sedimented in over the years. Residents tell me there used to be springs in there that they're gone, and, there's a lot of weeds in there, and it just probably doesn't have the volume it once did.
And I want to make this comment also. There was some discussion in council and some discussion amongst this body back when we did the large roundabout that we shared with the town of Verona. And Fitchburg essentially paid 100% of those costs. Now we have a lake that's in the town of Verona. We're paying half the cost, and the lake is 100% in the town of Verona. And so I kind of have some questions about, here they are telling us, well, we're not going to help you fix the road, but boy, get it done. It is used by a lot of their residents. Now we have a lake that's in their town. We're paying for a study. I'm not going to oppose this tonight. I'm not going to, because I'm the chair, I'll let the rest of the committee vote. I'm going to bring this up at council and maybe have a conversation with staff about this, but I'm not sure I will support this. I'm undecided right now, but I think the town of Verona, and I respect them. I know their board chair, a good man, and I understand they're trying to be cost efficient, but so are we. And if there's going to be a partnership means two parties, not just one. And as a person who represents the taxpayers of this city, we want to give them the best deal we can.
It's a good point, Dan. Their residents aren't able to pass through the road either. Long as ours, they're stuck with one direction when it floods too.
Correct.
But the pond across from that, is that city of Madison or is that ours? Across the road at 151?
That's ours. That's our Goose Lake. That's
The DOT pond?
No.
I think that's the DOT
Are you-
pond.
Headed towards Verona, across from Goose Lake. All that runoff come off there from when Madison built all that housing up.
That's
you're
it's
talking
down a little bit. That's
That's down
Madison's.
quite a ways, yeah.
Does that back feed over
It
to
No.
Goose Lake at
no,
all?
it does not, no.
No,
How much does this cost, Mike?
But we're planning on it being a $30,000 study, $15,000 apiece.
So one other question I have on this too is, who has jurisdiction over the Quarry Ridge Recreation Area? Is that
we do.
the city?
That's ours.
So the other thing, kind of taking a look at living in this area, the water is clearly flowing from one end of the other. It's not just necessarily Goose Lake that's flooding and coming over. You can actually see water coming from the Quarry Ridge Recreation Area flowing down. So, it's all just meeting at the lowest point, which happens to be Fitchburg Road. I was going to say whoever, just before that, I wasn't sure if that was the city who had jurisdiction over that, but, that entity, I think, would also have a skin in that game. Since it's us, I see the
Yes.
benefit of that.
And another point is, the Goose Lake is all in their jurisdiction, but we do, it's a lot of our stormwater. I don't think there's any doubt that there's a fair amount of it that's our stormwater that ends up in Goose Lake. So I think that's why we've tried to be proactive with them. And had we had the ability to change maybe the overpass elevation, and then we could raise the street up underneath, we might not be having the same discussion, but that ship is gone for,
I'll say this, I'm not saying I'm against it or will vote against it, because I'm not gonna vote tonight. I'll let you guys vote.
You're gonna abstain until you talk.
Well, as a chair, I usually let the members vote. In the case of a tiebreaker, then I vote.
All them houses?
But what I would say is that I want to get more information before the council meeting on that.
yep.
That's all. That's my point of view.
Well, Mike, we have no, the study's done, then that's when the hard decision will be though, because that's gonna be
That's
that
correct.
number, that's gonna have to be a CIP or, that we can't, I don't know what the solution will be. Hopefully it's not big, but my sense is it won't be, it'll be small compared to what we're paying to study it. So the implementation. Hope I'm wrong, but.
And the study would kind of lay out, how feasible the options are, and what they are, and then, that's probably the bigger decision.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, without any comments then, we will go into a vote. All in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed may say nay. And in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, that passes. And we are now on item 6G. This is a ordinance, it's ordinance 2020-006, the responsible bidder ordinance. Coming here just from the public to speak is Mr. Andrew Dish, and he is with the Brotherhood of Carpenters, and he's going to speak about this proposal.
I'll move approval of ordinance, or do we have a,
Well, let's do the motion first, and then we'll let people
Okay.
speak.
so ordinance, do we have to have an approval on this, or
Is this just a review?
this is just a review?
We have a vote on it.
Yeah, still,
We'll
so
make a
you're gonna have to,
recommendation council.
you have to vote on it.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have
So,
to,
so I move approval of ordinance 2020-0-06.
I'll second it.
Okay, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Dish.
All right, thank you. Good evening. My name is Andrew Dish. I represent the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters. This ordinance is about discretion, flexibility, and tools to local bodies like the city of Fitchburg. It's about protecting the integrity of public construction projects and also protecting taxpayers. Generally, public construction projects must be competitively bid and awarded to the, quote, lowest responsible bidder, as you all know. But the statutes and case law provide little, if any, guidance on what constitutes the responsible bidder. And as a result, many award public work to any bidder other than the lowest bidder, even if there is good reason to believe the lowest bidder may end up costing the public and taxpayers more money in the long run due to poor work quality, project delays, and change orders. While low cost is the first priority, value is essential. As we all know, you get what you pay for. Most of the criteria contained in the ordinance in front of you merely requires a bidder to confirm that they are and have been recently in compliance with employment, labor laws, OSHA safety standards, unemployment and work comp requirements. If the contractor doesn't comply with the law, it's a low hurdle. They shouldn't be awarded a public contract. It's really that simple. If a contractor cheats the system by failing to pay workers' comp or unemployment insurance, thereby giving themselves a competitive advantage over their competitors that play by the rules, they shouldn't be rewarded and enriched with taxpayer dollars for a public contract. I'll just wrap up. I'll free to answer any questions, but also this is a ordinance has been passed or very similar language has been passed by other municipalities around the state. For example, in Brown County, it passed unanimously. The city of Superior passed it most recently, and most close to home, the village of Blue Mounds passed it last month. For example, when it passed in Brown County, it passed unanimously, as I mentioned. So it's hardly been controversial, and I would hope that it also passes tonight in Fitchburg and later in the week at council.
Okay, now, what we'll do then is we'll take questions and then we'll let the director speak. You want to speak first?
I would speak first, because there might be questions that
Yeah, okay, go
you could
ahead.
answer based on what I speak. So what I did is took this ordinance, looked at it, made a few revisions based on, I did call a lot of contractors that have done work in the area that have been really good contractors in Fitchburg, make sure it didn't have any negative implications to the bidding environment or what they would have to do, both cost and whether they'd want to bid or not, and got good feedback. So what you have before you, I feel very comfortable with, does not negatively impact the competitive bidding market that we have. And I do think that it provides some safeguards for the city of Fitchburg, and that's why I'm okay with the way it's written. I do think it's some additional protections. Some of what's in there we already had, like we had some liability insurance requirements and that. It was just part of our bid documents. It wasn't part of our ordinance per se, so this kind of maybe cleans that up a little bit. And then we have, for some smaller contracts, we have an exception because sometimes specialty contractors might have more difficulty. So we have an exception for up to a certain dollar value. I think it's $250,000, which, might be tower painting and where there's more limited, resources as far as bidding. But what you see before for me, I'm very comfortable with. It might be a first step. It might be something we go back and add to in the future. But at this point in time, I think I've pretty well vetted this document through our contractors and our staff as well.
Okay, anyone, any questions?
I was just, having reviewed many bids, over the years, I think we've had a pretty good framework. We're not adding much here, are we, Mike? It seemed like I've seen all these things, or we've evaluated all these things, or we've, excluded bidders because they didn't meet some of these in the past. Granted, you haven't been here that long, but.
We're not, and in my experience, a couple of things that we're adding are if they have some serious outstanding OSHA violations, which to our point is a safety concern for us and our residents, so I think that's not a bad protection. There's a few things like they should have a written safety plan. We agree. We didn't have that in our ordinance, but it's in this. So I don't think we're adding anything that's onerous. And the way we're doing it is there's an affidavit of compliance. So it isn't something that we've got to go out and see that they have a safety plan. They sign something with their bid document stating that they comply with this ordinance. So it doesn't add a lot of staff time either. And honestly, when I talked to the contractors, they said they do these similar things in a lot of other places, so it's not onerous on them either.
Okay, that was my comment. I work in a different business, but I see a lot of these same things when I have to bid on work, so that it looked it looked like a document I've seen many times before.
Okay, one other thing I want to bring up, so I'm going to have a motion to add some language related to apprenticeship. There was some initial language we had related to an apprenticeship program, and I'll say this, as someone, I've been talking with the carpenters and with the operating engineers and others, and we're dealing with projects that are bigger projects in scope, over $250,000. And so when the taxpayer is making that sort of investment, it does make sense to me that there is some sort of training requirement. And I've talked to a lot of these guys that work in the trades, and they do pretty skilled, pretty technical work. And when we're talking about thousands and thousands, perhaps millions of dollars in a lot of cases, it makes sense for our bigger projects, our more complex projects, that there is some sort of training requirement associated with those bids. Further, I would say a lot of our contractors, union and non-union, already have apprenticeship programs out there. So I think and I think we had some initial language that I was working with Andrew and with the mayor that had some apprenticeship language. And then, and I don't know, maybe you can speak to it, Mike, about the apprenticeship component. I like the apprenticeship concept. I think apprenticeships are great. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Dish, since you're more familiar with it than me, and then I'll let Mike speak to it as well. What are your thoughts on this apprenticeship deal? We talked about some of the language. I kind of like the apprenticeship idea.
Sure, I think, again, that's not uncommon. The apprenticeship standard were in the ordinances that passed in Brown County, Superior, Blue Mounds, et cetera. And because, as Mike mentioned, the trigger, like this would only be triggered for projects over $250,000 in value. It is going to be your more complex projects. So on the apprenticeship issue, for large complex projects over $250,000, there's two main reasons why that's a good idea. First of all, it's inherently dangerous work. Real simply, people need to know what they're doing. It's in the interest of public welfare and safety. Second of all, the public should invest in companies that invest in the workforce through training programs. Obviously, aging workforce, everyone's heard about the skills gap, workforce shortages. there are contractors that are investing in apprenticeship training to make sure that they are safe job sites, that people are, know what they're doing. Properly trained employees building our public facilities protect public safety. There are going to be small examples of like smaller projects that might be like a really niche contractor that aren't apprenticeable, and those would invariably fall, below the $250,000 threshold. And to your point of apprenticeship programs in the state, Dan, if a contractor participates in a certified Department of Workforce Development apprenticeship program, that goes beyond union and non-union. So for example, non-union contractors participate in DWD certified training programs, so do union contractors. For example, I brought a list, it's a publicly available document from the Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards, and it's a really nice report, and I'll pass it around, of all the active apprentices in Wisconsin by trade, by contractor. It's 55 pages long, so clearly there's no shortage of contractors, union and non-union, that are investing in training, and I think that's obviously in the public's best interest.
So one more thing I wanted to add, the issue out in Sun Prairie, because I know they did a responsible bidder ordinance as well, is that correct?
Yeah, and in fact, it's more restrictive than the language that you've seen in response to out-of-state contractor that their employees were not trained.
No apprenticeship program.
No apprenticeship program, not registered to do business in the state, which is also a provision in the responsible bidder ordinance. And so they unfortunately adopted it in response to, the tragic event
Explosion.
that occurred. Right.
So and it was in 2018 that occurred, 2018?
Yeah, it was last summer.
A year and a half ago. Okay, so I'll read the language, and I have it written down. But I'll let, maybe Mike, you want to weigh in about the apprenticeship component. I'm kind of interested in that. I think it seems like a good idea. Of course, there's, I want to have an open discussion on that.
Sure. I'll be honest, I like the idea of apprenticeship. I'm just concerned just because of the bidding environment we have here and how competitive it's been, and we've been seeing bids creep up and up. It's not an issue that I was able to vet as completely as the other issues, as far as who participates and who doesn't. I think, a great preponderance of the bigger contractors around our area do participate, but we've had a lot of out-of-area bidders that we've had to have bid to keep our prices in line so that projects are affordable. And, I haven't been able to do that kind of an exhaustive survey to see what the impact would be. So I'll be honest, I like apprenticeship, but I'm not sure. I'm kind of a little skeptical that it might have a negative impact on the competitiveness of our bids. And that's why I took it out at this point, and that's when I said this might be an iterative process where we could add things in as we go on, but that's just my point right now, and I just am concerned because we have had escalating costs, and I don't want anything to continue to escaliate.
Well, I agree with you. We don't want that. I like the apprenticeship component, and as most of you know, I'm kind of a budget hawk on the council.
Very much.
And we don't want higher bids.
Right.
However, if we are going to invest, thousands and thousands or millions of dollars in projects, they need to be done right. That situation that you referenced in Sun Prairie was a situation where perhaps, I don't know, was a person not properly trained? We got to avoid accidents. I've heard examples of jobs or work being done, especially with safety, where sand is coming in and someone could, be buried alive, but because they had the proper training, they were able to avoid, what could have been a very unfortunate situation, I'll say, a catastrophe. And so I like that it only makes sense to me, and I understand about the cost. No one cares more about cost than me. But we also got to make sure things are done right, and we have to account for the safety of our workers. That's very important. And so we can't overlook those things. And for that reason, I'm going to make the following motion, and we can debate it a little bit more and have some discussion. This is a very kind of interesting topic, but I'll make the motion as followed, to add a definition of what an apprenticeship program is, and then B, what our policy would be, and this would be to add the language to the document as follows. Definition: apprenticeship program, quote, means a program that is approved by the U.S. Department of Labor or state apprenticeship agency that has graduated apprentices to journeyman status for 3 years, or a program that has been registered with the federal or state government within the last 3 years, provided that such a program graduates apprentices to journeyman status with the indentured period excluded from the meaning of apprenticeship program is any industry recognized apprenticeship program. Our policy would be as follows. B, for B5, for any contractor with more than 10 employees, the contractor participates in an apprenticeship program or has a written alternative training program sufficient to ensure that its employees may safely perform the work required by the Public Works contract. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, and so we will go into debate on that. I will pass this around for you to read, and then if you pass it to the director, we will debate the apprenticeship.
Can I ask one question, Dan? Is that the original language that was in the?
Yes, yes.
That's, just.
So that would be, so that would be item number, it would fall in, if it were to go back in, under B.
But it was the original language as it was written?
Yep, that's right.
From the,
So does this apply to subcontractors as well?
This does not,
Okay. Okay.
not as written. And part of that is because, again, a lot of those subcontractors are very niche contractors, like a striper or a specialty contractor, where then we really get into maybe excluding some contractors. And it gets a little more onerous on the prime contractor too, to collect all those affidavits at the time of bid. So again, that's something that, if you guys want to look at that in the future, but as an iterative process, I thought was probably not the right time to include, and that's my reasoning.
And again, these are typically bigger projects themselves, but I'm trying to think if we would run into a situation in which we're dealing somebody who has more than 10 employees, but there's just not an apprenticeship program that applies.
And the reason I took it out, I'll give you a specific example, is the Burn Pond project is over 250,000, and we struggled. I think who actually got the bid but was high and got rejected had an apprenticeship program, but we would probably exclude, I can think of 2 or 3 contractors in the area that maybe would be excluded from that kind of a project. So, like I said, that part, it's a lot harder to vet and understand, what the impact might be.
And I would worry, I'm thinking of it in this term too. If we're vetting our contractors, we're making sure that we've gone through the paces that they have, they're, meet basic qualifications throughout the state. My general thought process is that having the apprenticeship language in there basically kind of tells them how to go about their business. And if they, aren't going about their business in the way that we like it, tough cookies, we're going to go with somebody that may already have it. I don't know if I'm thinking quite right on that, but.
I think, and you'll see the list of contractors being passed around that do participate. It's a standard industry practice.
Sure.
So I think it's 55 pages. I think it's categorized by alpha. So I think any prime or general contractor that's bid on work in the city, you're going to find on that list because it's such a ironclad industry standard.
Okay.
So one other thing on apprenticeship, apprenticeship is really the gold standard. It's a contract between the state, the contractor, and the worker that person's going to be trained with actual, objective standards. So there's a price to that. It's an investment, and I think we should reward, the actors that are making that investment in our workforce. But it also ensures the safety aspect, and I think the safety aspect translates to the end product, which is a high-quality product on time, under budget, for the taxpayers in Fitchburg.
Okay.
Dave?
I was in a construction trade for years. I never was a big contractor, but all my men were apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And if you didn't get good men that were skilled, your insurance would come back to haunt you.
Sure.
If you got, it was just a plus for you to do it. To have that skilled labor.
Yeah, so I would say this, and the point you made earlier, Michael, and very thoughtful, and I do want to save on costs, but I think it's so important that these people, on the bigger projects, you know, if someone's doing leaf blowing or someone's doing a shed, there's obviously niche areas the city can hire for, and we want to be inclusive of all the entities that do that. However, I would say this, for the bigger projects, and when you have some very intense stuff, and when things go wrong, you can have some real disasters. I mean, you saw Sun Prairie, but there's other examples too, I'm sure. And so we want to avoid that, and we also want to, when we're spending taxpayer dollars, we want to make sure things are done right. We don't have to redo projects and things like that. Now, you mentioned, we don't want to tell people how to run their business. I totally agree with that. I agree with that. However, because we're spending taxpayer dollars, we should have some standards in terms of the, you know, it's just like a teacher. You wouldn't hire someone to come in and teach a math class that didn't have any background in math. You know, you can have some standards. I'm not going to tell them how to run the school, but, you know, you got to have that, you know. So
But Dan,
I wouldn't have an accountant that had never dealt with numbers before.
Sorry, but in the amendment language, I believe that you read off, there is actually a safe harbor if it's really niche. First of all, there's two thresholds that you have to meet. So it's going to only apply to large projects. One is the 250,000 trigger for the ordinance in general, and then within the ordinance, the apprenticeship standard is only for employers with 10 or more employees. And then if it's not an apprenticeable trade, as long as they have a written alternative program in-house that I believe is in your amendment, it provides, you know, additional sort of safety valve for real niche industries like a dredge that may not be apprenticeable.
Right. Okay. So any other comments or questions?
I just comment.
Go ahead.
I'm a big supporter of apprenticeships. I've trained,
Thank you. Okay.
over the years, I've trained many electrician apprentices. You know, they administered their journeyman's exam. You know, it's the lifeblood. So, apprenticeships are what drives our state's economy. I'm really a big supporter, but I don't feel we should put this in our ordinance. It would always be my preference. Companies, it's in their best interest to do this, but as a city organization, this ordinance seems pretty clear to me. We have good protections in here. I would support this if you wanted to raise it to $500,000, then you would have my support. Otherwise, I would prefer to leave
Well,
it
that might
out.
actually not be, you know, what do you think about that?
I'd prefer to leave it out if
I mean,
at that level, that gives a little more leeway. And
you
the
know-
example I'd give you, there's a concrete, they do substation foundations. It's a company that I know, and they are outstanding. You know, and it's owner occupied, and he's trained his guys over the years, and you know, they do safe work, they do accurate. I don't believe they have an apprenticeship, but they do good work. They're an exception. You know, I'd say
Right.
exception, but I'll bid jobs, and
Right.
people want to say, well, have your guys gone through an apprenticeship? I don't have it where I work now. It's a small company, but I'm personally training guys, giving them a lot of guidance. And you know, I've had jobs where I said, nope, you guys don't know enough to do the job. I've been doing it for almost 40 years. So I would, again, I'm a very big supporter of it. It's great, you know, it's for young people getting into apprenticeship. I would recommend that over college, over many things. I just don't feel it has a place in our ordinance. We have a good ordinance here that as written, and I probably could support it if we went if we went higher on there. I think there's smaller things that.
what if we did that, Dave? You know, what if I did a Second Amendment? I think I might do that too. I think that makes sense. You know, I'll let both the director and Andrew speak to that, but I'll make a motion to raise the threshold.
Just talking that though for the apprenticeship part of it, for the whole wad.
What's that?
Are you talking just for the apprenticeship part of it to go to $500,000 and leave the other at 250, the rest of the ordinance?
I hadn't thought about that, but I was more concerned an apprenticeship requirement if we
I
were.
think that would be a better way, don't you?
Yeah.
So what would be under the two?
Okay, I have to see the language because, so I'll accept a friendly amendment to my amendment. How about that? And we can apply the $500,000, thank you, thanks, Mike. We can apply the $500,000 threshold to definition 3, definition,
That would keep all you people like.
how about right there before, after B5, and we'll reinsert that, for any contractor with more than 10 employees bidding in any project, and I'll write it down, bidding on any project.
Why are we specifying number of employees to it? See, this is my issue, you know, we're a city body trying to get work done safely, you know, we would prefer to hire apprenticeships, but is it my business as the city to tell contractors how to run their business? If they're
Right.
not running a certain way, I don't want them working here, but, you know, that level, you know how tough business is. I don't have to explain it to you. You know more than,
I
you know more
I
than
can-
anyone.
you know, if you-
You're living it. You're living it, you know.
Well, I think you could, with the, you could replace the 10 employees and trigger at 500,000. I think maybe that gets to.
How about, we'll do this.
I would find that acceptable.
Okay.
For any contractor bidding on a project of $500,000 or more, the contractor, and we'll do that.
How do you feel?
So it
about
would
that,
read like
Michael?
this. This is my motion. I'll withdraw the first motion, make a second motion. For any contractor bidding on any project of $500,000 or more, comma, the contractor participates in an apprenticeship program or has a written alternative training program sufficient to ensure that employees may safely perform the work required by the Public Works contract. I'll pass it down, you take a look. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. And Mike, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate, you know, I'm with Dave. I really think the apprenticeship's important. I do think there's a gap in the skills trade. I just want to go on the record as just being concerned about what it could do to the cost of our projects and the implications it might have. And just for an example, is I'm trying to get outside contractors to come into Fitchburg to bid some of these projects, and some of them might be over 500,000. I mean, I know contractors out of the area that bid $2 and $3 million projects, and I know several of them won't have apprenticeship, so it's going to be hard to get them to come here. That's my concern. I totally like the premise of apprenticeship. I've had a brother-in-law that was an apprentice electrician. You know, he went through the process, so I think it's a good process. I think it's a necessary process. I'm just concerned because we're in such a competitive bidding market that it might have a negative impact on our bids, and that's what I've been trying to avoid.
And Mike, something you said actually kind of, is making me think about this too. It's, we don't have an ordinance like this in place today, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so, ordinances are fantastic. They help build in and they help set the standards and definitions, and that's what they're there for. And if over time we find that other bodies, other jurisdictions may have this language and they're getting, plenty of responses in for their RFPs, for their projects, maybe that's something that we could take a look at as an iterative process, but just kind of going through, touching this once and then, not evaluating every, 2-3 years, something like that. I don't want to hamstring you. So that would be my other concern with that is apprenticeships. They help the business that we're working with be better, safer, all the things that we're looking for. But for us to kind of go in there and say, this is how you have to do those sorts of things to get our business, that seems a little bit off.
So I agree with you, and
Well, I'm gonna counter, so you're not recognized right now, Mike, I'm sorry. So what I'm gonna say is this, have we ever taken any bids have we done business with anybody over $500,000 that has not had a training or apprenticeship program? I mean, to me, that's a little scary. I mean, we have large projects, we don't know if these people are trained, we don't know their backgrounds, I don't know,
It may keep the contractors out that you don't want bidding on your projects.
yeah.
Dan, you probably would actually like what I was going to say.
Okay, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I work for you guys, so it's what your pleasure is. I just have to let you know what my thoughts are and what my process is. So it is what you guys direct in the end of the matter. So, that's the bottom line. I just want you to know what my concerns are and where I'm coming from, so.
And I do appreciate that, Mike, and I can tell you, I appreciate you working with me on this, and staff, they always let me know what they think, and I let them know what I think too, and at the end of the day, we take a vote. So, anybody else?
Good thing.
Well, I think a lot of our problem with bidding is the fact we're bidding when everybody's busy. A lot of these projects should be out for bids in the wintertime. That's where there's deep construction going on. You'd probably be getting a lot better bids out of people.
Anybody else? Okay, a good discussion. Mike, thanks for working on this. If there's nothing else, we'll go to a vote. Well, there's two votes. We got to vote on the amendment and then on the main motion. So let's vote on the amendment first. All in favor of the amendment, please indicate so by saying aye. And I'll say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed to the amendment, they say nay.
Opposed?
And so it's 3-1, and then we're back to the original proposal with the amended language included now on the RBO. All in favor of passage? Do we want to debate the main motion anymore, or is anyone have anything else? On the main motion?
I would just say this again. I don't necessarily see the need for the amendment. Since it's in, I still will vote for this because I think this is still an excellent idea.
Okay. So anybody else before we vote? Okay, all in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed may say nay. And in the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Thank you for that. And so we will move along in the agenda. I believe that was our last item. And so we are on announcements. The next Board of Public Works meeting will take place on February 3rd, 2020. Is that 1 week from today?
It is 1 week.
It is 1 week.
1 week from today. Okay, is there any other announcements? Is there anything on Fish Hatchery Road that we should be aware of?
Just the bids are back signed. I think the mayor signed it, and we're just waiting for a couple internal signatures, and then we'll be looking at getting a schedule and getting things started. I think they have some preliminary meetings set up with some of the focus groups as far as the construction and that.
Okay.
One other thing, Mike, thank you to you and your staff for keeping the roads clear over those last couple of weeks. I know it's been a while. I know we've had just kind of that constant drum of snow. But, as I've been driving around the city, I haven't seen anybody, snowed in, and you guys have gotten to it real quick. So thanks and appreciation for that.
Thank you. I'll pass that along.
Okay. And so then, if there's no other announcements, we will go to adjournment. And is there a motion to adjourn?
Move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion is not debatable. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed can say nay. The ayes have it. We're in adjournment. Thank you.